Hi, my name's Pamela Gibson, and this is my story. At the age of 10, I was raised in a Pentecostal church, so I really knew what faith was and a walk with God, as I have always walked with Him since early childhood, and I would never have had my faith challenged like it was this past March, on March 2nd, early one morning in an operating room in Presby Hospital. October, I went to get new eyeglasses, not having any vision problems. The eye doctor pulled me aside and asked me to run some more testing on my eyes, and came back to state that he thought I had a cataract and he wanted to follow up in January. So this past January, I went to have the cataract checked, and once again his demeanor changed and he pulled me aside and said, it's not a cataract, and I need you to see an eye surgeon at Eye and Ear Hospital. And he said, you're seeing her tomorrow, I've already called. So that was quite surprising, but I did. I went the next day to Eye and Ear, and at the end of the testing, she announced that she thought I had optic nerve swelling in my left eye, and to be sure, she wanted me to have an MRI. All this was happening so fast, but I was prayerful and asked my friends to pray that whatever results of the MRI stated, that it would be treatable. So 2 days later, I had an MRI. That was February 14th, and Will and I went out for Valentine's dinner, and as I'm waiting for a table, I look down and it's 6 o'clock at night and the phone's ringing, and it's the doctor's office. And here it was the doctor himself, and he said, Pamela, this is something we don't discuss on the phone, but there's a large mass behind your eye and you need to come in. The next morning we met with her and she showed us the MRI, and there was a small, it looked like a tumor the size of an almond. It wasn't real big, and she thought it would be treatable through laser surgery. And she wanted me to see the neurologist, the brain surgeon, and I said, give me his number, and she said, no, dear, you will walk across the walkway from Eye and Ear to Presby, go up to the nurse and say, I'm Pamela, and it's urgent, and he will see you. So Will and I walked across to the brain surgeon's office. Within 10 minutes, they saw me, and he was a young doctor and sat down and was very, very confident that the mass behind my eye was not an almond size. It was the size of my fist, but it was a meningioma, and it was benign. But the problem was, because of where it was positioned, it was wrapped around the brain artery. He could not go through invasively through the side of my head. He would have to make an incision from this side of my head to this side of the head, remove my eyebrow bone, and go through my eye. But he said this is a routine procedure, and it would last 4 to 5 hours. He told me, you know, he needed to have this done as quickly as possible, and I worked for an elementary school and we had a lot of things going on, and I asked if I could come in the summer. And he said, Pamela, you have no options. If you don't do this within 2 weeks, you will suffer a stroke, and the consequences will not be good. So I told him, whatever you need me to do, I will do. I left his office. I called my sisters and my mother, and I asked them to have their churches pray. And I also contacted Linda Rechtenwald, and she said she called Pastor Steve. And he not only said to tell me that he was going to pray for me, but he personally wanted to pray with me the following Sunday. So after the service, I walked up to Pastor Steve, and he just knew I had a mass in my head, but Linda didn't give him any detail. And Pastor Steve anointed me with oil, and I remember distinctly he made the sign of the cross above my left eye. This is where the mass was, but Pastor Steve had no idea. And when he touched my head, this warm sensation filled my head, and I wasn't sure what it was, but I just felt at peace. The following week, I went in on Tuesday, and there were 2 surgeons there to meet me about the procedure that would happen, and they assured me it was only going to be an 8-hour procedure. The tumor was not the size of my fist, but the size of the surgeon's fist. It was deeply embedded underneath my brain, pushing the brain up onto my head and wrapped around this brain artery. And when he said hope, I said the word pray in my head. He said, I hope for your sake that the tumor slides off the artery. because if it doesn't, this is going to cause grave complications. He then asked me if I was left or right-handed, and I said I'm right-handed. And I knew that was the wrong answer by the look in his eyes. And he said, Pamela, the left side of your brain controls the right side of your body. So I have to tell you there's a possibility you will awake and be paralyzed on your right side of your body. I was accepting that, and the peace that God had given me when Pastor Steve prayed me, I could not even make myself upset or nervous at this point. And I said, is there anything else? And he said, well, there is. Not only will you be paralyzed, but you will not be able to understand speech or speak. And the room got very silent. And I said, and I don't have any other options, correct? And he said, very, very, in a soft voice, no. So I said, I will be here tomorrow morning at 5 in the morning, and I will be ready for my surgery. Again, I called and asked everyone to pray. That night, of course, I did not sleep, but I was at peace, and I wrote my son a letter, and I wrote my daughter a letter, and I wrote my fiance a letter, and told them to always stay close to God, and I love them, and no matter what God brought me with tomorrow, I would be thankful. I remember a message, and it just came back to me. Pastor Steve had preached maybe a month or two ago to come boldly to God, like they did in the New Testament. Not to say, oh, I hope, I wish, I want, but rise and be healed in the name of Jesus. And at 8 o'clock in the morning, I said goodbye to my family and my fiancé Will, not knowing what was going to happen next when I woke. But I didn't wake up in ICU. I woke up during surgery, and I was surrounded by brilliant silver lights that filled my whole entire body like a film around me. A brilliant silver light I had never seen before. And it seemed like my body was in a struggle for a half hour as it was being pulled toward a brilliant light above me. I was being pulled by my legs. And I could not cry out. I could not speak or cry out, but my mind could cry out. And I cried out to the Lord to let me stay with my children. And it was in that instant, everything went black. And I awoke in ICU, and I turned to my right, and it was very quiet. I remember it being very quiet. And I looked at Will, and he was holding my right hand. And my mind started to race because I remembered my right side of my body. And it was still quiet. So I don't know if I could hear anyone speaking to me or what was going on. And then all of a sudden, when I opened my right eye, because my left eye was completely swollen as if I was in a fight, I heard Will say clearly, I love you. And I knew. He touched my hand and squeezed my right hand. And I praised God because my right side was completely mobile and I could understand his words. And I was very weak, but I could whisper, I love you. And I fell back to sleep. About 5 or 6 days in ICU, I went home. And I slowly healed, and in 2 weeks I came back, and he walked in the room after all my tests that morning and smiled and said, you're like a miracle. I have never seen anyone recover like you have recovered. I'm taking you off your brain seizure medicine. I'm weaning you off your blood pressure medicine. And within a week, I was only taking Tylenol. I was back to work in my elementary school on April 18th with a warm reception of a beautiful staff and full of children that loved me. And I'm continuing each day to get stronger. But I remember so well, I have a Bible verse, and I believe it's 2 Corinthians, I'm going to say 12:9. My grace is sufficient for you because my power is made great in your weakness. I had that on my refrigerator for years when my father passed away 14 years ago. And I lived that verse this year. And I'm very thankful that I'm sitting here and I have the opportunity to share with you the love of God and his power. And if I've touched you in any way, I want you to know that God, no matter what you're going through, will meet you and loves you. And he can meet you in your place like he did mine. Thank you.